Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this second North American webinar. Today we're going to be talking about building winning FP&A teams in the new normal. My name is Hans Gobin. I am International FP&A Board Member, Ambassador, and today I'll be the facilitator as well. Joining us today is Larissa Melnichuk, who is the founder and CEO of FP&A Trends. So let me quickly take you through the agenda for today. Today we'll be going through FP&A team roles and skills in the new normal. How do we build synergistic FP&A teams? Adapting FP&A teams to the new normal. How can technology help us to build winning FP&A teams? FP&A recruitment in the new normal, conclusion and recommendations. Just a quick summary of FP&A Trends Group. Just so you guys know, we are today in 27 cities, 16 countries, and 4 continents. I've just highlighted some of the North American boards we have, so as to keep you updated. And these are the meetings we've had so far in North America. And this is our second webinar, or online format, obviously. It is now a good time to start introducing our speakers for the day. Our first speaker today is Alban de Watteville, who is Vice President, Finance, FP&A Leader, Global Connect at Nielsen. Also a Geneva FP&A board member. Alban will today take us through FP&A team roles and skills. Alban, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Hans. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Our second speaker today is Paul Barnhurst, Director of FP&A, Dealer and Aftermarket Division at Solera. Paul will be sharing with us his experience on how to build synergistic FP&A teams. Paul, glad to have you with us tonight. Paul, you're on mute, by the way.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Hans. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Third speaker for the day is Ron Monterio, Senior Director of Finance at Kruger Products, also a Toronto FP&A board member. Ron will today speak on how he has adapted his FP&A team to the new normal. Ron, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Hans. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Our fourth speaker for today is Pras, who's Senior Director at SAP, based in Toronto, and also frequent presenter at our Toronto FP&A board. Pras will take us through how technology can help us to build winning FP&A team. Pras, nice to have you with us.
Great being here as well. Thanks, Hans.
Thank you. And our final speaker for the day will be Jason Flanders, Global Executive Director, Robert Half Management Resources at Robert Half, who will give us insight into FP&A recruitment and trends in the new normal. Jason, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Hans. Looking forward to being a part of the event.
Thank you very much. And if I can ask our speakers now to turn their webcam and go on mute until we come to the set of presentation. Thank you very much, speakers and panelists. We have a great panel today, and we're looking forward to great discussion. Thank you. So moving on. What is the digital FP&A board format? The webinar is set for 90 minutes. We have 4 polls that we're looking forward for you guys to participate in. We have an interactive Q&A session at the end. Please remember that the chat box is open as from now. So after each presentation, if you would like to put in a question, and also please direct the question as to whoever you want us to ask the question. And then you guys can very definitely network with our speakers through LinkedIn. Very important, at the end of the webinar, when we close, there is a feedback session. So if you could please help us, give us our feedback. This is very valuable to us. Thank you very much. Time to thank our technology partner, which is SAP, one of the world's leading providers of modern solution. Our recruitment partner, which is Robert Half today, one of the world's leading professional recruitment consultancies. Without the two of them, this would have been almost impossible. So thank you both. Before we start our presentation, I'd like to just quickly remind you of the 5 critical FP&A team roles for a successful FP&A function. This is adapted by our international board around the world, and it comes from Mark Gandy's initial 3 FP&A critical roles. So first of all, the architect, the data architect. The data architect understands drivers and data architecture. They build driver-based model. They implement flexible analytical solutions. What is a data scientist? What is an FP&A data scientist? They use scientific, mathematical, statistical, and machine learning techniques to extract, cleanse, organize, combine, analyze, and present data to help management make decision-making, take management decision. They are a bridge between data science and finance, and more we're seeing firms bring data scientists within the FP&A, within the finance arena. The analysts, as we all know, they're great at interpreting results beyond the just what and why. Describe, predict, prescribe. They also, at this point in time, in the new normal, spending a lot more time in scenario analysis. The storyteller. The storyteller turns complex into very simple, digestible nuggets that any leadership can grasp. Masters of dialogues, creative, narrative, improvise on the fly, and that then leaves us wanting more from what they've just told us around whatever financial information it is. And finally, the influencer. One step beyond a good storyteller, knows their target market. They create influencing strategies specific to the target and then go on to influence. The final result is obviously a very trustworthy business partner. So that was a quick update on, the 5 critical FP&A team role required to have a great function. And all of our presenters and panelists will today be touching on some of these, if not all. So now it's a good time for us to start with our first presentation, which will be given by Alban de Watteville, VP Finance, FP&A Leader, Global Connect Nielsen, and he will be sharing with us FP&A team roles and skills. So Alban, you're very welcome. The floor is yours.
So thanks, Hans, and hi everybody. So I'm very thrilled to be on this call to talk about roles and skills and organization in general for FP&A. I've been working at Nielsen for more than 15 years. I've been in leadership position for the last 10 years, and and I've been working on our FP&A teams for a very long time to get it where it is today. And so I'm glad to share some of my learnings and how I see the vision for our function to evolve. I truly thank Larissa for organizing these type of meetings. I believe that the more we share, the more we learn together, the more we make the function be better. So it's a great pleasure to be here. So if we could move to the next slide. And so the way I like to think about a vision is really through 3 dimensions. So usually I always start with organization, then we move to infrastructure and tool and processes, and we finish with role and responsibilities. Now to unpack the question that I've been asked to answer, which is really on the structure with the roles and the skill set that are in the new structure of FP&A, I think we need to do actually the reverse order. So you start with what are the expectations from FP&A, then you move to how you answer those expectations, and we'll see that technology today is a fundamental part, right, of that solution. And then we can finish on the the organization and the roles that will staff that organization. So we move to the next slide, and next slide. All right. Okay, so expectations. So if you look at this slide, this should be very familiar to all of you, right? So this is really the bread and butter of what an FP&A team should be doing today. So it looks probably very similar to what we would have presented even 10 years ago, but in reality it's completely different. So financial management, closing the books, making sure that we get to deliver results to where we expect them to land, making sure we have the right reporting in place, analytics and analysis, planning, forecasting, scenarios, and everything that goes with it. But more importantly, business partnering, and as every team will do, some good level of talent development. All of that with one goal to drive value and business insight. Now, why is it so different from before? Is because of the data requirement that we have to deal with. It's just completely different. So if we move to the next slide, Hans, and this is really the reason why. So what you see on this slide is really what FP&A has to face, right? So we have multiple data sources. You start with your traditional ERP or accounting system. You add a CRM or pipeline. You add a SRM tool for vendor. You add your inventory, and then you add all the data sources that you have to deal with, in the business, being your maybe client data, supplier data, some external data that you need to build in, and all of that, supply chain data, all of that with expectation that you can use all of that data in a as live as possible manner to drive instant decisions for the management groups. So the only way to do that, if you think how we were doing it in the past, all of us were Excel gurus, right? All of us. So I can remember writing macros and in Excel to integrate, ingest data from different sources, automate as much as you could, build some graph on it, and then post into a PowerPoint to get management to make decisions based on insights. All of that was all done in one software, which we all love, and that's Excel, right? But here, if you really want to be efficient, you really need to professionalize the organization around, your tech, your tech vision. Having ingestions of data, so that is, that takes work has on its own. Then once it's ingested in data lake, which most likely will be on a cloud-based, server, you'll have to transform the data to make sure that it can speak to each other and can relate to each other, and then you will finally, with data scientists, model the data to create, a predictive or prescriptive analytics, depending on what you are looking for, that can then be used by analysts or visualization gurus that create best-in-class reports for the organization to use. All of that while you also need to manage system access, making sure that all the data goes to the right people and have the right level of security around it, right? So I think it's completely different. So if you move to the next slide, so this is really how we think about it at Nielsen. So you have 3 dimensions in our organization, being the group dimension. So looking at all the policies, all the cost center setups, P&L setup, how we want to look at our financials, making sure we have targets, we have a budget in order, and everything, guidelines, and so forth. Product-driven organization or segments that we see on this slide. This is really about 10% of the FP&A or business finance team today, so it's a relatively small group. We have still, big groups in geographies. Those geographies really are, the teams that partner with the organization at local level. And the new group on this slide that has emerged in the last few years is really a business intelligence group. These three groups reporting function, but more importantly, all the infrastructure that we just touched on about. And if you move to the right side of the slide, in that business intelligence groups, you really have all the data specialists and analyst roles that are described here. Your architect that will develop the architecture of all the data flows of your systems, the web developers that may develop new web-based applications to manage inflow or upstream information or downstream information as well. Data scientists, we've talked about it, that will develop a lot of statistics or statistical and mathematical models for the organization. Data modeling team that works with them and make sure we have the right analytics. Data governance, which to me is one of the biggest group today, because managing security and making sure that data goes to the right personnel is absolutely critical. And finally, more traditional data analysts, if you will, those roles were already in the organization or will remain in the organization. All of those roles today, ideally wants to be co-located in hubs, right? Because they can work together to solve for business, business questions. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you have business interpreters, right? That's how really we categorize those roles at Nielsen, where we have business partners and business analysts. Those two roles are in a way similar, different in terms of seniority and experience, but they are really close in terms of they need to have great business acumen, market knowledge, product knowledge, so they can really help business stakeholders to drive value from the data and the analytics that are provided to them through the data specialist and analyst roles. Very, very important. So, this organization, to be successful, need to be staffed with very different skill sets, very different type of professionals. And while in the past we're used for FP&A to have teams of superstars, meaning people that could do everything, you really are looking at here, a superstar team made of really specialists. Right? And I think that's really the difference with how we've set up FP&A in the past. So, I'm thrilled about it. I think we need to get this right. FP&A is moving forward. The world is as well. So we need to take that train. And I'll be very happy to take questions. Thanks, Hans.
Alban, thank you very much for a great insight into what Nielsen and what you are doing within the FP&A function of such a huge organization, geographically spread, and lots of people within the FP&A function. Absolutely great piece of work. I would like to invite our panelists to now give us their opinion and their takeaway from Alban's presentation. So Paul, if you could give us your quick 1 minute update on Alban's, please.
Yeah, thanks, Alban. That was a great presentation. I think you made a great point. One, you have to understand the expectations, what your team needs to deliver, and design your technology around that, and know the roles you need. I mean, like you said, 15, 20 years ago, I really liked the part of everybody had to be a specialist and do it all. It was all done in Excel. You figured out how to do VBA, all the different things. Today, it's really about having a team of specialists that each can fulfill their role, and knowing how that fits into the organization and what specialists you need to meet the expectations. Because the technology that's needed, the level you need to do is going to vary by business, and what you need to meet your company's needs and to make sure you're being that business partner that the business needs. So it was a great presentation. Thanks, Alban.
Thank you, Paul. I would like to ask Pras now to give us his comment, please, Pras.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alban. That was fantastic. I really liked what you said about the different skill sets and required, and especially that around scenario planning. In fact, I recall, since we're talking about teams right now, I recall earlier this year during the pandemic, McKinsey came out with a study talking about the most important parts of finance, the three most important areas. And I think number one or number two was that of FP&A, because being able to plan for different scenarios and understand different eventualities, or put different eventualities into your model so that you can model out different outcomes and things like that. Being able to provide this kind of guidance as an FP&A team and unit to the business constituents, I think adds a lot more value, not just FP&A as a team collectively and cohesively together, but also as part of the overall enterprise and organization. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pras. Thank you very much, Paul. Alban, thank you for a great presentation. This brings us nicely on to our polling question, which I am now going to move on to. And I'm just about to now launch our polling question. So please, webinar attendees, please, if you could give us your opinion on the poll. So I've just launched it. And the first question is, what role do you think is the most important FP&A role for the future of your organization? So what role do you think is the most important FP&A role for the future of your organization? The architect, the data scientist, the analyst, the storyteller, or the influencer? We have 50% of you voted already. I'll give you another 10 seconds to vote, please, if you do. And I will close the vote in the next couple of seconds. I am now going to close the poll, and I'm now going to share the results. 10% of our attendees have said it is the architect, 15% the data scientist, 11% the analyst, 24% the storyteller, and 40% the influencer. Alban, can I come to you and ask you what is your opinion on what we're seeing here?
Actually, I think it's great data. I think it's a very difficult question, right? I would struggle to answer that question because I truly believe you need every single role to make a great FP&A organization today. But by far, FP&A needs to, drive value to the business and create value. So the influencers will always have a critical role in the FP&A organization. I do believe the influencers today cannot, be as influential if you don't have all the other roles to support them. So, it's great. I think it's a great question. Difficult to answer, but I understand the results here, and I'm pretty sure that I would have done the same.
Thank you, Alban. And Paul, what do you see? Does that resonate to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I would have expected. What's interesting is, if you look at the first three items on here, those roles are more technical. The bottom two are more kind of the soft skills, right? The influencer and the storyteller. And all the data that we see out there says the most important thing people want in the team that they're focusing on, especially outside of your first role, is those soft skills, right? Being able to influence and storytell, to me, is really about business partnering. And I think business partnering is what our customers see, right? Those first three, as much they see it, but in a different way. I think what they really see is those last two, and those are what's most important. So it doesn't surprise me. It's it's what I would have expected, and I would have voted, influencer first myself.
Thank you, Paul. Exactly as you said, it is the softer skills where we see people putting a lot more emphasis on at this point in time. So thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, Alban. Alban, thank you for a great presentation and your insight. I'm now going to hide the polling, and it's now a good time to pass on to our second panelist, which is Paul Barnhurst, Director of FP&A Dealer and Aftermarket Division at Solera. So Paul, the mic is yours. Ready when you are, Paul.
Great, thanks, Hans. Appreciate that. So like Hans said, my name is Paul Barnhurst. I'm a Director of FP&A at Solera. I've been working in FP&A for about 12 years now, been with Solera for about 4, and going to talk a little bit about building teams, and particularly building, winning synergistic teams in the new normal. So I want to start here on the right side here. We see a quote from Stephen R. Covey, one of the great generational leaders of our time, and he talked about synergy is better than my way or your way. I really like it's our way. And when, as a team, you find your way that works for you, you're able to produce a lot more in the way of results. We've all seen the teams where, hey, it's my way or the highway, or everybody does things themselves. Picture on the left is a great example of that. You go to sports, whether it's basketball that we have here, or football or soccer, or whatever the sport may be, it's really about bringing that whole team together. You may have a team full of superstars that doesn't do well, and you may have a team of players that aren't considered the most talented that do really well. And what separates them is really the synergy, what they've built as a team, their ability to work together. This picture is a team that at that point there isn't synergy. You can kind of see everybody's dejected and they're in it for themselves. And that's the last thing you want when you're working to build a synergistic team. You really want the parts to be, the parts together to be better than they are as individuals. That whole of your team accomplishes great things. If we can go to the next slide, Hans. So here there's 4 keys that I see for building winning FP&A teams. And the first that I think is critical is understanding the skills required for the team. And I'll give 2 examples. About I want to say a year and a half ago, as I was taking over a new role, we had a major problem with our data. Data was the #1 issue we were experiencing as a team and as a business. We just didn't have good insight. It was a mess. So we hired a data scientist. He also had some analyst skills, and he came and cleaned things up, did a ton of work to help us better understand the data, building out some reporting, doing analysis, looking at all the different things that we needed from a data scientist. And then fast forward to a few months ago, he moved on from my team to a corporate role, and I had to backfill that position. And when we backfilled it, I didn't look for a data scientist. At this point, I really needed somebody with strong FP&A, traditional FP&A skills, and went out and hired someone more of an analyst. Same team, but the need had changed. I understood at this point the skills required for where the team was at, where we were in kind of that life cycle, were different. So I went out and hired somebody who was more of a traditional kind of business partnering with a little bit of the analyst skills versus someone that was much stronger on the data side. So the first thing is you really have to understand, what skills do I need in my team? And that will change over time. It's not always going to be the same for a team. When somebody leaves, you may need to replace them with a different skill set, depending on where the business is at. The second is provide your team the freedom to learn and fail. Something I learned young, I want to say I was about 20, I was listening to a speaker, and he came out, and this guy was very successful. He was worth almost $1 billion, had run, large corporations. And he looked at all of us that were there attending, and he told us, he goes, I've never had a failure in my life. And I remember as a 20-year-old, I was sitting there thinking, what is he talking about? I've had plenty of failures. And then he emphasized, I've only had a learning experience. And that's how we need to look at it with our teams. As long as they're trying and they're learning, we need to provide them that freedom to learn and fail. An example would be, I had an employee who I had turned over a process to. And at first I wanted them to do the process the same way I had done it. And I could tell they didn't want to. And I stepped back and I said, in this case, is that process, is what I built important? Or is it that they can deliver certain outputs? And it really was, as long as they could deliver the outputs, the process didn't matter in this situation. So I went back to him and I said, you can build it however you want. As long as you deliver these outputs, I'm going to give you the freedom to do what you want. And they were very successful. And this particular employee has now been promoted within the company and continues to get more responsibility. And I look at that and think, would things have been different if I just said, nope, you have to do it my way? As a leader, it's important that we give our team members that ability to learn and fail. And the third is establishing high expectations and clear objectives. I know I've been part of teams where, you're not sure what the objectives are. You're not sure the expectations. Like, what do you really want from me? And so it's critical that we let them know what's expected, each individual and the team as a whole, that both know what they're trying to accomplish. And those are going to vary over time and obviously throughout the year. And then the fourth is to build trust and respect. And these are not in order of importance. I mean, I could easily see putting, trust and respect first. I had a situation, this is early in my career, where I supported a senior leader that was dishonest, that, hid documents from us as a team to try to manipulate and making sure he hit his numbers every year. And so there was no trust. It was broken in this situation. And I saw how much that impacted the team. It impacted me, and it impacted the other people that worked with them, because we didn't have that foundation of trust. It doesn't mean everybody has to like each other and want to go to happy hour together and necessarily be good friends, but they have to have a level of trust and respect to be able to work together. And so I see that as for the, key things to really building synergistic teams is the skills, giving them the freedom to fail, having high expectations, and then having trust and respect. Hans, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. And so here, this is, any of you who've had an organizational behavior class will probably remember something like this. I've always really liked what they call the 4 stages of team performance or team development. You start by forming a team. You bring it together. Everybody figures things out. You can kind of see the picture here of the frog. It's, hi, I'm so-and-so. You get to know each other. And then as that happens, there's usually a period of storming where there's conflict in a team. Today, right now, I'm kind of in that forming stage. I just took over a new team. We brought in new team members. We don't have a single person on my team that's been in the same role of the business they're supporting for more than 6 months. So, I'm really being reminded of what you have to do when you form a team, and seeing a little bit of that storming and conflict as we try to figure out how to work together. And then as you start to resolve that, you move into what's called the norming stage, which is when you start to see better results. And then finally, as you hit a performing stage, and you can go through each of these phases with the same team at different times. It's not like they're all independent and they never overlap. But something I've liked from a leadership perspective is there's a principle I learned, it was actually in some Boy Scout training, that kind of applies to each of these different stages that we can use. And it's called the EDGE principle. And I like that acronym because it's easy to remember. When you're forming a team, there's a lot of explaining. So today with my team, I spend multiple hours a day doing training because we have people under 3 months. One of them's a month in their role. And so I have to spend a lot of time really explaining and helping them understand what needs to be done. During the storming stage, it becomes a little bit more of the D, demonstrating what needs to be done. You move a little bit out of the explaining. And then under the norming stage, there's a little more guiding. The team's starting to come together and you're guiding them more. And then when they're performing, really as the leader, you step back and you make sure you're enabling the team. Do they have the technology they need? Do they have the support they need? Are you going to bat for them? Do they have those clear objectives? And so in each of these stages, it changes. And that principle, the EDGE, it applies to a team, but it also applies to individuals when you're working with them, an individual task. And I really love the model because it's situational, and you can look at it and say, okay, as a leader, what do I need to implement today for the individual and for the team to be successful? And that changes over time. And I found with the team I have right now, I think I have a great team that we're really starting to, quickly form and come together and seeing results. And I look forward to getting that entire team to that performing stage. And so, I think that's something we can all accomplish, and it's important that we know what we need to do to make sure our team is performing at its highest level, especially in this new normal. Thanks, Hans. That's all I have.
Paul, thank you very much for a great presentation, and thank you for all of those live sort of examples that you gave in terms of building the synergistic team, but also taking us through the 4 stages of team performance. Thank you very much, Paul. I would like to ask Alban to give us his comments on Paul's presentation and subject matter, please. Alban?
Oh, I mean, I can completely relate to to this presentation and what Paul has shared with the group. The way I like to think about it is, team climate. You need to have the right climate to make the team successful. It starts with flexibility, right? To get the team to be able to work at any time from anywhere. I mean, it's very relevant today, but it was relevant already 10 years ago, right? You need to have that flexibility. You need to drive accountability. So you have the flexibility, but you need to deliver results and what is expected of you. And I think Paul touched on that. You need to drive, set standards so you can have credibility, right, with the organization and develop some brand, right, for the functions. You need to drive communication at all levels in the organization. You need to allow for innovation, but that also means for failure, right, because you can't innovate without having failures. And you need to make sure that you reward the team, right, for driving everybody for greater success. So I can relate. It's really great presentation. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Alban. Ron, can we have your comment on the presentation and the subject matter, please, Ron?
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, Paul, excellent presentation. I think it was fantastic. And I really love how you talked about synergy almost being more important than having a bunch of superstars on the team. And I live in Toronto, so you guys know the Toronto Raptors were the NBA champions last year. And it was a great example of a team that really came together really fast and delivered exceptional results. And again, I love the accountability, ownership, and learning from what I call acceptable failures. And Paul's example is fantastic of letting a team member take that accountability and eventually get promoted. So love it. And I think it's as relevant, if not more than ever, given the virtual environment we're in. So fantastic job, Paul.
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you very much, Alban. And I always like giving the Liverpool FC club example, exactly as what you've said, Ron, in terms of Klopp bringing together a team that was not there or thereabouts, but then winning the league, the Champions League, etc. So thank you very much, all. Now is a good time for us to move on to the second polling question of the day, which is around team synergy, and I'm just about to launch that now. So I've just launched the second polling question. What is the biggest barrier to team synergy in your organization, do you think? Is it internal competitiveness, different mindset, poor listening and communication skills, knowledge deficit, a lack of alignment around goal? If you can vote, please, that'll be excellent. We will give you another 10-15 seconds to vote. 55% of you have already voted. I'm going to give it another 5-10 seconds, and then I will close the poll right now. And I'm going to share the results. So 15% have said internal competitiveness, 15% different mindset, 19% poor listening and communication skills, 11% knowledge deficit, and around 39 to 40% a lack of alignment and around goals. Can I ask Paul, what is your opinion on what we've just seen in terms of the polls there? Do you relate to that?
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that. I think the lack of alignment around goals can be critical because everybody, we all have internal drivers. We all have our intrinsic things that drive us, and those can be different. And so sometimes those may not jive with the organizational goals. Somebody may be in it for a promotion or things. And so it really takes a leader to help get that buy-in, right? And I think that's critical. And often that's lacking in a team because it's not easy to do. And then, poor listening and communication skills. Again, we live in a day where it's so easy to quote unquote communicate, but we're not really communicating, right? I sent an email, so I've communicated, or I sent an IM versus sometimes picking up the phone and actually talking to somebody. So I think, doesn't surprise me.
Thank you very much, Paul. Ron, your quick half a minute comment on this, please.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Paul was saying, and especially in the time where a lot of us in different businesses have to really pivot. I think it's that clarity of goals that becomes so much more important, and ensuring that we align as an organization or even within a specific team around maybe goals that are quite different than what we started the year. So I think I think it makes sense from my perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Ron. And thank you very much, Paul, for the a great presentation. I'm now going to hide this, and now is a good time to move on to our next presentation, which is Adapting FP&A Team to the New Normal by Ron. And again, reminder, Ron is a Senior Director at Kruger Products. So Ron, over to you whenever you're ready.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Hans. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know Hans stole my thunder there, but I've always wanted to say that. So thrilled to be a part of this webinar. Larissa was sharing 450 participants in 25 countries. So fantastic job to Larissa, Hans, Elena, and the organizing team. It's just an amazing example of where there's a will, there's a way. So really thankful for being involved in this, and thank you to the organizing team. So I want to start with this quote. And I love it because it's obviously we're in a very different climate within the world, within our businesses, within our teams. And what's important for us as FP&A leaders is to recognize there is opportunity. And so the theme of my presentation is really going to be around how do we as FP&A leaders, how do we as an FP&A community really take advantage of this situation and recognize that it is a challenging situation, but we can help lead the teams through to success. So Hans, if you don't mind flipping to the next slide. And the first example I'll give you is in about March of this year. So I work for a tissue company, Kruger Products, and clearly, obviously, our products have really exploded in terms of demand. And our organization was really trying to figure out how do we respond to the unprecedented demand in the business environment. And myself as the FP&A lead within our organization, I met with our FP&A team and we talked about what's the best approach to the forecast. And we had our first forecast of the year. It's usually about a 2-month process where we involve several organizational members in order to drive the best financial forecast that we can have. And what we decided as a team was the best approach would be to do a much higher level approach and do a forecast, but do it at a higher level where we're not involving supply chain, sales, and other functions to the extent we usually do. And what was great about that is we actually freed up the organization, freed up supply chain, freed up sales and marketing to really help our customers and our consumers get the products we need. And what was great was we were recognized for our leadership as a finance and FP&A function to help the organization focus on what's more and more important. And in this case, it was actually going less detailed in terms of forecasting as opposed to a much deeper process that we typically use. And then as we're going through budget period right now, what we've employed is a scenario-based approach. So what we did was we said, let's involve our cross-functional teams right from the outset and talk about, as we head into 2021, what are the macro assumptions we want to align on, and what are the scenarios that we want to build in order to have a budget that we can quickly pivot from one area to another. So, this was a good example where FP&A took a very different approach than we typically have in order to help the organization move forward. Next slide, Hans. Okay, excellent. So if any of you have been working in manufacturing organizations, there's a constant pull and push between sales, marketing, and supply chain. So supply chain typically wants to reduce the number of SKUs that an organization is selling in order to drive higher efficiency at plants or mills. And sales and marketing typically want to launch more and more SKUs to build the brand and achieve other goals such as customer requests. And when I say customers, I mean retailers. And so this crisis, if you can imagine a tissue business, our demand skyrocketed. So what we actually did was we reduced our SKU count by a dramatic percentage. And what was beautiful to me as an FP&A professional is this is an analysis I've done several times theoretically, but it's very hard to get an organization to pull the trigger on this type of action. And this is one where we actually did reduce our SKUs. And what we saw was an outcome of significantly higher mill efficiency, paper mills in our company, and higher profit in those months where we reduced the SKUs. And so, what we did as an FP&A team, along with the supply chain team, is we showed the facts to say, hey, as we get out of this crisis, we should not revert back to the original SKU count, which was, probably too high. How do we find the middle ground as an organization in order to capitalize on this amazing profitability that we saw during the crisis and have a permanent step change in margin and mill profitability from the team? So, really, as I step back as an FP&A professional, this was, a bit of a silver lining where we actually found a way to permanently improve profitability within our organization if we can be disciplined enough not to revert back to the original SKU count. So it's a really cool practical example that came up in our organization. Next slide on. And then the other thing is, I was joking around with our management team this weekend that I've seen more of them this past weekend than my family. And it got me thinking in a different way to say, especially as we think globally here, why can't we think outside the box? So especially in times like a budget time, if my organization had individuals working in Europe or Asia or Africa, it could mean such a more powerful team driving that budget process. So again, this is more to stretch our collective thinking and say, hey, especially now as we are all adapted to this environment of virtual collaboration, how can we think out of the box from an FP&A standpoint? Next slide. And my last slide here in terms of content, and I absolutely love the visual of a lighthouse. And I think us as FP&A leaders can really use this to our advantage. And the 4 points I want to hit home with this is number one, stability, confidence, and conviction. And the example I'll use here is our CEO during the crisis in March. A couple of things he did. One is, to establish trust, he literally walked around all our offices. And I remember him clearly coming into my office saying, hey, Ron, what are you doing here? And I didn't understand the gravity of the situation at the time. He said, go home right now. Safety is your number one priority. And he literally walked around the entire office. And, for me, that was a powerful message around, hey, him as a leader really taking advantage, taking care of the team. And the second part was he had weekly calls with the entire organization. And that hits on a couple of messages in here. So number one, stability that I talked about. Second is guidance and prioritization, and as importantly, eliminating distractions. So my example of planning at a higher level kind of freed up organizational time to focus on what's most important. Communication, I think that came up in the first poll. Clear, concise, and consistent. And it's clear that, if you don't have this in an organization, individuals will kind of make up their own narrative. It's just human nature. So that communication, super important, especially in this time. And then maintaining or improving morale. And, one of the things my team does is, we find a way, even if we're working long hours, to have fun with it. One of the individuals of the team, he's traveled, significantly around the world, and he typically puts on different backgrounds, and we have fun with it. So again, you could do a cocktail hour on Friday. I think I was talking to Hans about that, but it's finding creative ways to really work and build that synergy, to use Paul's words, as a team. So I love this. I think it's a good visual I typically use during these times, and hopefully it resonates with you. Next slide. Yeah, and lastly, obviously I wanted to close with the same quote I started. And I think in the midst of this type of crisis, there is opportunity. And I think us with our broad business skill set as FP&A leaders can really help organizations thrive, can help teams thrive. And I hope you guys all gain some value from this presentation and can see some of this resonating with you. So thank you for your time.
Ron, thank you very much for a great presentation, Ron. Great insight. I like the fact that how you guys have moved a negative into a positive, and you've taken that step to build on what you have and turn it around to a positive. So thank you very much for that. I would like to ask Paul. Paul, can you give us your comment on Ron's presentation, please, or the subject matter?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ron. That was great. I really loved the subject, and I particularly like how the quote that he started and ended with, in the midst of every crisis lies, great opportunity. I think it's, it's critical that we look at a situation and figure out how can we move forward? What changes do we need to make? Do we need to simplify things? Do we need to make it more complex? And the other thing I really appreciated is how he shared about the CEO. You know, above all, during all this time that's so crazy, is making sure we care about the people. I mean, it's the most important thing we can do, is making sure we're there to support them. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have people, we don't have a company. So thanks. I thought it was great, Ron.
Thank you very much, Paul. Can we have Pras, please? Pras, can you just give us your quick comment on the presentation?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I'd love to thank Ron for is bringing up the Toronto Raptors as the previous NBA champions, seeing as the both of us are from the city of Toronto. But otherwise, no, I mean, I think it really makes sense that FP&A become the forefront of the organization. In fact, my view is that based on everything Ron has said and all what everyone else has indicated, is that FP&A is no longer a supporting function, but clearly a strategic function in not just within finance, but within any enterprise and organization, as long as they're allowed to execute on their initiatives and focus and on their roles to provide the best guidance.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Pras. Thank you very much, Paul. And Ron, thank you very much for a great presentation. And this brings us nicely on to our next polling question, which I will launch just now, if you bear with me a second. There we go. If you guys can vote, please. And the question is around what is the biggest remote work challenge? Working too much? Prioritizing your work? Interruptions? Loneliness and lack of human interaction? Communication issues and being out of the loop? If you can vote, please, that will be excellent. 38%, 47%, 56%. I'll give it another 10 seconds or so. And I'm now going to close the poll. So thank you very much. And I'm now going to share the answers to the poll. So 26% have said working too much, 4% around prioritizing, 7% around interruptions, 25% loneliness and lack of human interaction, 38% around communication issues and being out of the loop. Ron, what is your opinion on what we've just seen or what we're seeing here, please?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very interesting question right now, and obviously quite topical. And so the first one, obviously, communications and being out of the loop. I completely understand that. I think what we've done on our team is we actually have a daily check-in, which I mean might be excessive, but for us, I've got a lot of new team members, so I think that's helped to kind of bridge that gap. And then the second one, obviously, loneliness and lack of human interaction. Our organization, so Kruger Products, did a survey. And this popped up as probably the biggest one. And what they did was they actually had mental health sessions that all individuals could join. And they hired an external firm to kind of help people cope with it. And it is a reality that you don't have as much of the socializing within work. And a lot of times you're working alone on this. So for me, completely understand it. For me, it would be interruptions. I got a dog and 2 kids and things like that. So I've had to find my way to figure out how to concentrate. So really topical poll, completely understand why the numbers that came up as the highest are coming up.
Thank you very much, Ron. And Pras, can we have a quick comment on what we're seeing here and what your feedback is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not surprised by the communication issues and being out of the loop. I mean, for me personally, the majority of my colleagues are in Germany or Vancouver, but I work out of Toronto. So this hasn't been as much of a challenge. A lot of it has been business as normal, but at the same time, I've always been feeling that just not having that personal interaction, just having, being able to go over to someone's desk or whatnot, that does cause challenges in terms of not, maybe getting the intricacies of day-to-day activities that drive decisions or things that might be going on within the organization. But I agree with Ron. I mean, I think that's a brilliant idea, having the daily check-ins. On my team, because we are globally spread out, we tend to have twice a week interactions, which I think, although it works, I mean, even if you can spare 10, 15, 20 minutes a day as a team at a mutually convenient time, it helps bring people together and just have a quick chit chat, maybe just discuss little things here and there that not just, work on terms of the the hard skills that finance requires in terms of their day-to-day activities as that particular team in that particular organization, but also soft things that would bring them together otherwise, just like going together for lunch or for a quick coffee or whatnot.
Thank you very much, Pras. And as we can see, working too much has always been an issue, but more importantly, loneliness and lack of human interactions whilst we're working away from home. At home, most of the time, and communication issues. So those are the two things that we need to tackle, incessantly. Thank you. Thank you very much, both. Brings us nicely to our next presentation, which is from Pras, Senior Director at SAP, and Pras will be talking to us around technology to build winning FP&A teams. So Pras, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Hans. Thank you for this opportunity, everyone. And really what I'd like to spend this time focusing on is, the latest and greatest in technology that's available to FP&A to be successful, not just as an individual, but as a collective unit. As we know, I think, on this call, we've referenced different successful teams, whether it's Liverpool, the Cavaliers, or the Raptors. All of these, organizations have not just been successful because they're good at what they do, but it's because they've been equipped with the right facilities, the right modeling, the right people to handle their salary caps, the right, the ability to bring people together. So again, they've all had technology to help them excel beyond the playing field or the basketball court. And for me, I feel it's the same for finance as well. Earlier this year, many of you participated in the FP&A Trends survey where you brought in some really interesting insights. I think some of these key ones that really stuck out for me were the fact that 31% of you said that FP&A was not deemed as being strategic, and also the 30% of you said that beyond that, they didn't seem that your organization didn't feel that a proper ROI was able to come from the FP&A function itself. Additionally, 74% of you thought that too much time is being spent on data collection, data generation, information generation, which means that not enough time was being spent on generating actually insights. In fact, only 26% of you said that you had time to do that. And I think the scarier one for being a team is that only 63% of you said that most of your communication is, conducted by either email or in-person meetings. And to be a successful team, I think you have to overcome these particular gaps and challenges. So let's talk about what some of those things might be. So if we can move to the next slide. Fantastic. So the first one is, having the bare basic, I think at this point in time, a cloud-based planning tool. The beauty of having a cloud-based planning tool is, number one, for me, you've moved away from Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel does not bring people together as a team. It really lets people work in their own individual silos, having their own individual models that they're really the masters of, that they can't share, beyond their individual realms. Having a cloud-based planning tool, especially a modern cloud-based planning tool that's really owned by finance, means that you have a tool that's really easy to use, regardless of which of these cloud-based tools you work with are, that's also managed by you, finance, which means that very little, if not any, support from IT. You don't have to have a shared services agreement with IT where they do upgrades twice a year. There's downtimes. They have to write reports for you. I think it was Paul or someone that talked earlier about, or Alban, I apologize, but talking about how, it's really about being a better storyteller. I think, or actually the survey talked about being a better storyteller was a key requirement. I think of the number of people in the planning space right now that don't have the access to analytics, that they, cut and paste Excel spreadsheets that they've worked on into PowerPoint, and then all of a sudden, someone changes an assumption somewhere and they go back to, crossing T's, dotting I's. I recall my days in FP&A where we had to do, monthly reports or monthly reporting packages or whatnot. And we spend the weekends creating these massive PowerPoint decks. And then all it came for was some director of finance or VP to come back and say, oh, we changed an assumption, got to go look through the deck to change all the rounding errors. Having analytics built into your cloud-based planning tool, which is very common these days, lets you actually do better planning and have analytics and insights built right into your solution. The next part is collaborating in the context of your plans. I mentioned before how 63% of you still communicate via email or via meetings. In this day and age, planning is no longer scheduled. Planning has to happen immediately and effectively and on the fly. Alban talked about scenario planning. Scenario planning is not a scheduled plan or budget that starts in August and then finishes in October and has X review cycles by C-level executives. Scenario plans are someone comes to you and says, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Our supply chain is shutting down. Our expenses, we don't know whether to accept a government assistance with regards to salaries or wages or whatnot. What do we do? In order to properly do that, you need a cloud-based planning tool, but you also need to be able to collaborate in the context of your plans with chat functionality, comments, things like that. So you're able to get answers and discuss immediately and on the fly. Next, please. The next one is predictive planning. The reason I brought up predictive planning is that, again, this came from the survey that I worked with FP&A Trends on, and I was able to get some results on. And I found this whole area of predictive planning to be quite interesting, and I sincerely hope that the results change. But only 6% of organizations say that they're using some sort of predictive planning now. That's fair. Predictive technology is fairly new, and not everybody is privy to it, and not everybody has the ability to invest in it. 14% said they would look at it in the next 6 months. That's a little promising. But what actually scared me was that 80% of their survey respondents said that, gave some combo of a few years, no plans, or seeing no value in predictive planning and technology. This is unfortunate because it clearly means to me that there's a lack of education from many of us to the respondents that felt that they were in the 80% of not really gaining any immediate value. The discussion we're having here is about teamwork, building better FP&A teams. It's not just about more headcounts or effective headcounts, but it's also having another headcount. Maybe that headcount is a predictive planning, where using predictive planning, you can generate quick scenarios or forecasts based on your underlying results from the past, as well as some assumptions that you're able to give that finally uncover hidden insights, things that might not be visible to to the naked eye in that manner. With predictive planning, I firmly believe that you're able to have better insights into your current data set that you might not be able to explore on. As planners and people in FP&A, we're all working ridiculously crazy hours. I'm sure many of you have stories of working well past regularly 2, 3, 4 in the morning during budget cycles, maybe earlier in your career. With proper predictive planning and such, this really isn't necessary. And finally, as I mentioned, scenario planning. With predictive planning, you're able to simulate future outcomes, not outcomes, multiple outcomes that give you best case, worst case, upside, downsides, based on many different scenarios and permutations together. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the ability to align all plans with technology. Moving away from Excel, moving away from old school planning solutions allows you to bring in plans from all across the enterprise. We know that CFOs don't just exist in finance. They're people that exist in marketing, sales, supply chain, IT, anybody who controls a budget sheet or a budget or an income statement of some sort. And they might be called managers of marketing finance, manager of sales finance, or whatnot. To be an effective team, it's about having the technology to lets you as an FP&A connect to all those people beyond FP&A that are in traditional planning analysis in those LOB roles and bring those plans together. And because you've brought those plans together, you're able to get insights into what they're doing and respond to market, in the moment to market disruptions, as we all experienced over the last few months. And with this, collectively, be a better team because you as overall are able to make faster and more confident decisions. Thank you very much.
Ross, thank you very much for an excellent set of presentation. Thank you for just going through, all the different sets of technologies and tools that people are using these days, but also how these tools are becoming part of the FP&A team, as you nicely mentioned. So thank you very much for that. I would like to ask Alban to give us his point of view on process presentation, please.
Sure. I mean, it's super relevant. Pras got it all, all right on the point. I mean, technology is not an option anymore for FP&A. It's a requirement. It's a super exciting time. I mean, just think about it, how we are going to evolve as a function in the next 5-10 years. I mean, I'm sure we'll all master scenario planning, prescriptive, predictive analytics, right? Integrated, running forecast that will be fully automated. But also think beyond, I think, financial data. I think the FP&A organization is ideally placed and positioned in the organization to play much beyond, just the financial budgets and analytics. It's really about driving business value through data, and that goes much further. So I think it's super exciting time, and very much looking forward to see how all of us are going to drive our functions, to future successes.
Thank you, Alban. Thank you very much. Ron, would you like to join in the conversation and give us your point of view as to the subject matter, please? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually hurts me because I'm in planning mode right now, and we're not quite there. So for me, it really is a push to say, how do we get there faster? Because especially in these times, I think I'll use the word, it should not be an option. And so for me personally, it kind of lights a fire under me to say, hey, this is the way to go. Scenario planning and being able to plan on the fly, as opposed to having a 2-month engine which goes and can't adapt to massive changes like we're seeing. So nice job, Pras, and appreciate it.
Pras, just to add to the whole conversation, I mean, where do you see people going more so than anything else at the moment in terms of asking for more work or putting more or concentrating a little bit more effort into what sort of place within your presentation?
Look, I mean, I think I told you, Hans, the other day when we were talking that I used to be an FP&A myself, and I proudly, well, not proudly, but I consider myself the worst FP&A analyst of all time, because when people came to me with questions, my automatic answer was, I'll get back to you. And I think FP&A is so pivotal in this day and age. I mean, we've seen it over the last few months. Financial decisions have to be made with the involvement at FP&A, which means that FP&A has to have a robust set of tools to be able to support these decisions. I know the survey results from a few months back, just before the pandemic, said that there was unfortunately 30 to 40% of people that said that they didn't see an ROI. FP&A people were saying that they didn't see an ROI, which is scary. Well, that ROI is not there. And if it's not there, I don't know what you've been doing as an FP&A unit for the last few months. So I think for FP&A, the key thing is, being able to not just make decisions and recommend decisions, but proactively go and make these decisions. When I was in FP&A myself, it was a pretty standardized process. At the end of the month, the general ledger would close. 2 days later, someone would reconcile the data. Then I'd do an actual planned variance that I report to the board or someone 5, 6, 7 days later. You know what? Big deal. That's of no value in this day and age, because I'm basically stating the obvious, stating old news. If you're not in a position as FP&A to proactively look at your ERP, being able to do real-time variance analysis, and not just give guidance because someone's asked you, but you're giving guidance proactively and telling people, oh my God, that's about to happen. That's, to me, is a true value and power of where FP&A is and where they can go in its full potential.
Thank you very much. That was great insight. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone, for your comment on process presentation. I think this is a good time for us to now go into the polling question, which is the last one for the day. So I am just going to open the last polling question, and I've just launched it. And I will read it out to you. This comes in nicely. Do you currently use modern collaborative technology for FP&A? Yes, we do. No, we do not, but plan to implement some in the near future. No, we do not, and do not have any plans for anything in the near future. 50% have already voted, which is fantastic. I'll give you guys another 10 seconds. And then I will close the poll. So closing the poll right now. Thank you very much for everybody who's participated. And I'm going to share the poll, and I would, so 31% said, yes, we do have collaborative planning tools. 46% no, we do not, but we plan to, so there is a lot of scope there. 23% is no, we do not, and we do not plan to implement any, which is a little bit worrying. Pras, what do you see here? Does that sort of resonate to what you're seeing out there at the moment?
Well, we know that some of the biggest trends, whether you talk to any planning vendor that I compete with or work with or whatnot, we all see the value of FP&A moving beyond FP&A and collaborating, connecting, extending plans all across the enterprise. So bringing all the plans together. But it's like you said, Hans, the one that scares me is that 23%. I'd love to gain insights into why they feel that they really can't or do not plan to implement it in the future. And hopefully it's a matter of ROI, investment, and lack of resources. But maybe it's something that it's a matter of maybe it's not something they plan to implement in the near future, but definitely look to implement in the upcoming future because it is of importance. And the idea here is we're talking about FP&A teamwork. That's the best way to build a team. Just FP&A showing its value not just as a organized team, but a team to the rest of the organization.
Thank you, Pras. Thank you for the insight. And Alban, what do you think? I mean, you use technology massively, and are you surprised by this last 23% and the results?
It's not like it's surprising. I think it probably says something different. It probably says that the person, I guess, right, on the pool that I've answered do not know that there are plans in the future, or they haven't yet made plan in the future to implement collaborative technology for FP&A. I'm pretty sure they will change mind, and it's a matter only of time, right? So, but on the 46 in the middle, it's not easy, right? I mean, one of the things that we haven't discussed is, we have a lot of tools available, but you need to get the organization to be ready. You need to get your structure to be ready. You need to rework on your processes. You have a lot of prerequisites to go through, and that takes time. And as a result, I think that's really the reason why most companies are still working on it and haven't cracked it as quickly as everybody's expecting. So it takes a lot of efforts to get there.
Thank you, Alban. And I think, as you said, 23%, there is opportunity there. And as and when we're going through the pandemic and God knows what is around the corner next, I think people will realize and are going to start thinking about, collaborative planning and all the tools available there. So Pras, thank you very much. And Alban, thank you very much. I'm going to now hide the polls, and good time to now move into the next presentation, which is going to be delivered by Jason Flanders, Robert Half, Executive Director, and Jason is going to talk to us around FP&A recruitment in the new normal. Jason, over to you.
Thank you, Hans. And maybe just I would start off by thanking the FP&A board. This is a wonderful opportunity to be with you all today, and it's been great hearing the insights to this point. And we're a proud partner of the FP&A board at Robert Half, so we very much appreciate the partnership. So we're going to talk about a few overarching topics today related to hiring trends and recruitment. The first you'll see here is related to the unemployment rate. And I think the key item to point out here, if you look at the national average, just shy of 8%, we want to make sure that hiring managers and folks in the FP&A space don't confuse that message with the demand for talent. We've seen a significant rise in demand for FP&A related skill sets. And from a financial management expertise perspective, you can see the unemployment rate there is only 2.8%, which really indicates the demand and how hard it is to find strong talent in FP&A. And then if you think about job growth as we transition to the next slide, and you look out a little bit in terms of forecasting, the national average projected job growth rate, and this is from 2019 through 2029, so roughly the next decade, you'll see there an increase of plus 4% anticipated. But once again, if you delineate and look at specifically financial management positions as it relates to the FP&A space, it's almost 4 times the national average. So tremendous job growth anticipated as it relates to FP&A, and I think that's very, very exciting, clearly for everyone on the call today. And this is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. The next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what's in demand. So if you think about skill sets in the FP&A space, and you've heard many of your panelists speak to what it takes to build a strong team. We've heard references to the Raptors, which is a great example of putting together all the components to build a strong culture that produces performance. And what we've done is we've broken this down into 3 buckets: the technical piece, the technology side of it, and the non-technical aspect of the skills in demand. And what we're seeing right now from the technical piece, the modeling, the forecasting, you've heard the data scientist role, you've heard the storytelling and the influencing and the importance therein. The technical aspect will always be a key component. We've heard a lot about systems and building technology around teams to help increase performance and execution. This continues to be a large driver in the FP&A space, whether it's predictive-based analytics, whether it's artificial intelligence or robotics, or whether it's cloud-based solutions as we look to enhance our capabilities. And then finally, and again, speaking to the team aspect, maybe some of the soft skills, the non-technical components, the collaboration, communication, problem solving, and persuasiveness, all key contributors to building a successful FP&A team, and continues to be a large requirement from the clients we speak with. Now, as we look into some of the hiring trends, what you'll notice here, finding skilled candidates is still very challenging. And I think that's evidenced by my earlier comments related to the unemployment numbers being so low in the FP&A space specifically. Companies are worried about retention. Employees are facing burnout, feeling overworked in some capacities. And I think it's very important to stay dialed in with your teams. And then the hiring process is changing, as you've all heard. Very important to understand remote capabilities, the ability to onboard and interview from a remote scenario, all very critical components as you look at hiring trends. And then we'll move into what challenges many companies are facing. And just a quick infographic, 54%, we've surveyed over 2,400 senior managers in the US on this. Over half are conducting remote interviews and onboarding remotely. 42% say the process for hiring has shortened, and then 42% are advertising their jobs from a fully remote capacity. So clearly changes that companies have had to make and that are often regarded as here to stay. And then finally, we'll wrap things up with what we're seeing as it relates to the labor model. And one thing has become clear is that the labor model has changed. We're seeing an emergence of a new labor model as we navigate this pandemic. Existing models are being disrupted by economic drivers, technology advancements, shifting employee expectations. And so clients are having to evolve rapidly. And it's hard to predict your workforce as you look towards the future. This new labor model makes it easier to deal with change. And what this illustrates is the use of project professionals and interim consultants is really a large movement in the staffing model arena right now. The left side of the chart shows the many peaks and troughs that you face in the FP&A space when trying to complete projects and looking at your hiring. You can be sometimes overstaffed or understaffed. In the new labor model on the right, you'll notice everything flows very smoothly. You are ebbing and flowing with your workflow and with demand to stay on time and under budget. And this is achieved through using consultants and interim-based project professionals to achieve that work. So with that, Hans, I will turn it back to you. Thank you.
Jason, thank you very much. It was a great set of presentation, and you've taken us through all the different elements that you're seeing at the moment, all the trends as well as the polling, which was just fantastic. So thank you very much for a great presentation. This now brings us nicely on to the next stage, which is the key sort of takeaway conclusion. And I'm going to leave you with this quick quote from Carnegie. It's not a quote, obviously, it's a survey. 85% of your financial success is due to skills in human engineering, your personality, your ability to communicate, negotiate, and lead. Shockingly, only 15% is due to technical knowledge. At this point in time, I would like to ask the members of the panel to give us, before we go to Q&A session, that is the member of the panel to give us the key takeaway from the session, please. So I would like to invite Alban to give us a quick half a minute key takeaway from this session, please.
Yeah, thanks, Hans. I mean, it's been so much has been covered already on this call today. I mean, I like that, you know, that statement here that we see on the page. I strongly believe technology is changing what we do as an FP&A function. I strongly believe that our soft skills will remain super critical to deliver business partnering and create value. But you know, technology is such an important part of getting us where FP&A is going to be in the future. So I think, you know, 85-15 feels maybe here a little bit overstated against where we're going to be in the future.
Thank you, Alban. Paul, can we have your key takeaway, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to what Alban said. You know, this quote here I think sums it up well. Is, you know, despite everything that's happening with technology, and it's a great enabler, it really does come to me, it comes down to the soft skills. So much of it is driven by that, right? I mean, technical skills are just a baseline. We all have to have them nowadays. They're not really a differentiator for whatever the role is. You know, if you don't have them, you're not considered. It's really those soft skills and developing them that are critical.
Thank you, Paul.
To success.
Thank you, Paul. Ron, can we have your quick takeaway, please?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Hans. And you know, I think this session's hit on a number of great themes. We talked about teamwork, technology, and the way that FP&A can really be an influencer. I think that poll really captured it really well. That this is a great opportunity for us as a collective organization, collective function, to really make a bigger impact within our organization and team. So I think it's been a fantastic session. I think it brings all those elements together to say, how can we influence the business and our stakeholders?
Thank you very much, Ron. Pras, can we have your takeaway, please?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've heard about the hard skills and the soft skills that help, you know, FP&A teams become much better teams. But I think one thing I would like to leave everyone with is the fact that, you know, with modern cloud-based technology, you know, it gives you the analytics, it gives you the predictive planning, it gives you real-time actual variance comparison. I mean, you don't really need to be a data scientist. A lot of that is already done for you, and it really gives, you know, planning and analysis to focus, you know, not just on the planning piece, but the analysis, something I was never able to do in my career, but I think everyone here will be able to be quite successful with going forward.
Thank you very much, Pras. And finally, Jason, what will be your key takeaway for this session, Jason?
Thank you, Hans. You know, what stands out to me is just how dynamic the FP&A space is, and it's very exciting. I think even if you just look back several years ago to the current state, how fluid you need to remain as a leader within the FP&A space, and adopt and embrace a lot of the technologies maybe that Pras has mentioned, while keeping in mind building your team culture, I think is a critical component as we continue to navigate the pandemic and get back to what may look like, quote unquote, the new normal for all of us. So great takeaways. Enjoyed the commentary from all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. It is good time now to go on the Q&A session. And at this point, I would like to pass the mic to Larissa. Larissa, if you're there, if you can share with us the questions, please.
Thank you so much, Hans, and thank you so much, everyone, for fantastic presentations and for sharing this incredible experience. We have a lot of questions, and I would like to ask our participants to use their text box for questions. Even if we don't have enough time to answer them, we will do this after the meeting, and we will send the answers to you. The first question is to you, Alban. Actually, it's both commentary and question. I think FP&A has been further expanded to FP&A and S&T, which includes financial planning and analysis, systems, and transformation team. Would you agree with this statement? And if this is so, what is the role of traditional finance and traditional finance FP&A business partnering in this?
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
mean, I'm fully aligned, right? So the fact that at Nielsen, in my team today, we have a business intelligence team, which is, kind of a different, way of calling, a corporate platform team, if you will, but that is purely specialized into technology, data, and making best in class, visualization, so that the entire organization, but also FP&A, can look good, right, and make sure we get the best insight and make the best decisions for the organization, is a statement of the fact that FP&A has evolved to have the S to it as a system. And for the T as transformation, FP&A is always involved in transformation in businesses, being in terms of pivoting an organization, from one structure to another, from driving some restructuring plans, from driving some investment plans. So a lot of the transformative actions go through FP&A, and most of the time FP&A is a driver for those programs. So I'm fully aligned to the comment. How do we partner, in that concept? I still believe, right, that FP&A is a partnering function. It's just that you don't want, I think, your team that is close to the business to do analytics reporting anymore. You want the business to have access in a live fashion to predictive and prescriptive analytics that are tailored to their need, tailored to personas, where they come to your FP&A organizations really to have some partnering, work and support, right, to make decisions. But you really don't want to spend the time where maybe we're spending it in the past. So I think it's absolutely, critical that we continue to partner with the business, but we should just, I think, position ourselves at a completely different level and get the analytics and reporting to be done by systems, right, and help the business make the best decisions with the skills that we have as business partners.
Thank you so much, Alban, for your answer. The next question is to you, Paul. As an FP&A leader, how do you balance developing specialists in each of the different critical roles versus cross-training balance skill sets and appreciation across all of the role types? So how do you manage this, Paul?
That's a great question, and there's not necessarily an easy answer to it, of balancing that. It's definitely important to cross-train, and I think the processes and the things that are standard to FP&A that you can have anyone do despite being a specialist, you can cross-train. Sometimes depending on the team and the need, you may have someone that's just a specialist that you don't cross-train. We had a situation like that over the last year and a half where we had a guy that wanted to be the data person on the team, but really didn't want to do the standard FP&A. So we didn't cross-train him, but we worked on helping others understand some of the data. So we cross-trained some of what he did. So when he would go out, we could be prepared as a team. So, I think it really depends on the role, and the team makeup, but there's no magic, like silver bullet to managing that. I think it's unique to the organization and the team you have. Obviously, it's important that you have process documents and that you work to cross-train wherever you can. So, you don't have one person you rely on for everything. But, I think you have to just prioritize it all and what's most important that you have cross-training for, what's critical, and work through there to make sure if you do lose a team member, you're not basically kind of in the dark, so to speak. You don't know what to do.
Thank you so much, Paul. The next question is to you, Ron. Ron, how do you coordinate CFO in addition to CEO increased needs due to COVID?
Yeah, no, I think it's a brilliant question. And I think myself as the FP&A lead, I have to figure out ways to get to both. And, the CEO, the CFO, You know, the interesting thing for me as a CEO wasn't a former finance person, but I think you have to be able to speak in different languages, so to say, you know, for example, with the CFO, you might talk a lot more technically. For CEO, what's the elevator speech? How do you get there right away? So it's, especially in this COVID period, I've had to figure out ways to navigate where we're, you know, accommodating both the CFO and CEO and other business leaders. So it's another example of how FP&A has to be really nimble and able to communicate very concisely and effectively.
Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you for your answer. Pras, the next question is to you. Pras, does the cloud technology that you mentioned require third-party vendors in addition to SAP software? What is the average time to implement those new features?
I mean, even though I'm from SAP, I'm not going to sit here talking about SAP software. I think there's a lot of great cloud software available for everyone here. Judging from my experiences, I mean, you know, there's organizations that have very strong FP&A individuals that lean on the IT side that I've seen do it all themselves. Others often rely on third-party vendors, but they rely on the third-party vendors not just for the nuts and bolts, creating reports, calculations, but also often they bring a third-party perspective from the experiences they have with other organizations. So, you know, my guidance would be that if you're going to work with any cloud-based technology, work also with a vendor that brings in best practices from, you know, your competitors or other people in different industries, so that, you know, you're not working in an echo chamber where they're building you what you think you need. They're building you what they think you need, what you think you need, and ultimately what makes you a better you know, finance department. And you know, with a lot of cloud-based vendors these days, I mean, especially with the content available from them, starter kits and packages, you know, I've seen people up and running within a few weeks to big bang projects, which, you know, these days are a few months. So again, it's a lot different than what it was in the past. Cloud-based vendors such as myself, we've just got a lot of content. We've got a lot of people with industry expertise out there to help you. So it is a lot easier, quicker, and faster. And the beauty with cloud is it's more OpEx versus CapEx. So it's easier to sometimes justify in this day and age.
Thank you so much, Pras. Thank you for your answer. Jason, the next question is to you. Jason, when recruiting FP&A, is it unreasonable to expect someone with skills in each of the category that we discussed here, such as technical, technology, and non-technical? Or are you finding recruiting for FP&A specialists in each category and then creating a synergistic team? So what would be your advice on this? How do you do this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a combination. I think sometimes you will be able to identify, quote unquote, the ideal candidate that possesses strong skill sets within all three of the buckets, which is an ideal scenario. But I do think oftentimes is related to the unemployment numbers too. It's very difficult. It's a very high demand skill set in the FP&A world right now. And if you can't isolate skill sets in all three buckets, I think it's important to prioritize in terms of what needs you have for your specific team. And so that might be the technical component that you need to upgrade in. Perhaps it's the technology piece or the non-technical. But do a complete evaluation in terms of where your team sits currently today and what you think the next individual needs to possess to enhance the overall strengths of that team.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you so much to all the panelists. I would like to conclude the Q&A session, but we have more questions and they're still coming. Please continue to send your questions. We will reply to them after the meeting. Hans, back to you, and thank you everyone for your questions and for your answers.
Thank you so much, Larissa, for your input, and thank you very much, members of the panelists. We now proceed to wrapping up the meeting from today. So thank you to everyone for participating. Thank you to SAP and Robert Half for their sponsorship. Thank you to the members of the panels for their time and their insight on great subjects. And as Larissa just mentioned, you know, the question keeps coming in. Please keep sending it, and we will answer to your question via email. The upcoming meetings. So we've got a couple listed here. We would like to see you join and come and talk to us again. And then finally, you've got being part of the global platform. So just before I close off the meeting and say thank you to all of you, once we close off again, please remember there's a feedback session at the end of the webinar, which is really very important to us. So if you could spend a couple of minutes and give us your feedback, it'll help going forward to improve as well as to look at other matters. So finally, again, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to the panelists, thank you to the sponsors, and thank you to all the webinar attendees for providing your insight, but also joining us and spending some time with us. We look forward to seeing you in the next one. From us all tonight, thank you very much and have a good evening. And please remember to give us your feedback at the end. Thank you, everybody. Good night, good afternoon, and good morning.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.